Now I request Professor Ambrish Saxena.
Thank you all. Thank you, Dr. Fakira Mohannak. And I remember your presentation in ICANN when we conducted in DME, we conducted this online conference, I believe, in India after this COVID lockdown happened for the first time and for 10 days, and so many people participated in that. So now coming to whatever, because I had prepared some very long things, so I was thinking continuously how to cut it short. I must tell you that though I'm in academics, but primarily I started my career as a journalist, and for 15, 16 years I was working with English newspapers, with Hindi newspapers, with television. I was on the Vinod Dwa's team in 90s. So I'm not that way academic still, despite being for long in academics and research. But then since coming to the topic, initially I will try to start with this academic orientation and looking into as to what actually social accountability is. So if we look into the academic definitions that I have found, that social accountability can be defined as an approach under which the accountability is ensured to the citizens who rely on civic engagements and where communication is in a dual direction, that is ordinary citizens and citizens group, they participate directly or indirectly in exerting accountability. Now, here there are two things which I can found. One, that the government makes effort to do the right kind of things, the desirable things which are necessary for their development. And on the other hand, there are citizens, the individual citizens, as well as the citizens groups, the NGOs, who are trying to make out whether whatever was expected from the group, whether that is being rendered, whether that's being provided or not. Now, if we look from the government's perspective and we look into the social accountability and the relationship with the governance, there are various instruments which the government use for the purpose of accountability, which we can put as either the political mechanism or the fiscal mechanism or administrative mechanism and the legal mechanism. But then when it comes to this relationship between the government and the people and the citizens, then I believe the responsibility of the government can be broadly divided into two aspects. One is the supply side responsibility, and the other is the demand side accountability. If I can try to define it precisely in very brief, because normally we conventional thing is that we normally talk about the supply side, because whatever policy and planning is expected on the part of the government tries to do that all, and at the end of the citizens they finally come out after that whole process is over, whether the benefits have been rendered to the people or not. But then when we talk about the demand side, then obviously we also look into the process. uh, this means during that particular development activity, we have to look into how much involvement is there of the people, how much participation is there from the people, and then during the process of any development project, we must also look into whether the kind of benefits which were actually committed to the people, whether all that is happening or not. Now, as far as the e-governance is concerned, because that's the thing which we always talk about since the time the internet arrived, and if in Indian context we try to find an example, then we find that for the first time we can remember in Andhra Pradesh when Chandrababu Naidu started his government. So he, as far as I know, he was the first person to introduce this e-governance in his administration. And but nowadays the kind of penetration of internet has happened. It's a very common feature that is happening. Now coming to the media's accountability. Now, if we look into the, because without social accountability or the governance part or the policy making part, if we don't understand this, then we are not able to actually fix as to what media's accountability is and what all is expected from the media. Now, coming to this, that there are certain instruments which we call as the media accountability instrument. So broadly, we can divide this into two parts. So one is the established instruments, and then there are innovative instruments. Now, when we talk about the established instruments, a very common example we can take that of the Press Council of India. In the case of television, we can also talk about the News Broadcasters Association. And, and then if we further go backward, then we also find such kind of instruments which are very, very old, and I think which have been there since the inception of journalism in India. A very common example is that of the letter to the editor. And then we also find that whenever something wrong, because I have been working in newspapers, so we find whenever something wrong happens on our part, on the part of journalists, unknowingly, but it happens, the profession is like that, you commit mistakes, but then you acknowledge, you accept that the mistake has been committed, and then we make use of the corrigion. So that can also be put part of this established instrument. And since I'm talking about this Press Council of India and News Broadcasters Association, NBA, then I must also refer to what the Supreme Court has said only 3 days back on a petition which was filed in the Supreme Court by Tablighi Jamaat. So the Supreme Court has talked about that how effective the instrument that has been created, the mechanism that has been created by NBA, whether that is affected or not, what we call the self-regulation. And in India, we have been following this old model of self-regulation, but the Supreme Court is of the view in the bench that was headed by the Chief Justice of India, Boble, that this self-regulation has failed. So the government has to come out with some kind of mechanism wherein the regulation is possible. And in this context, I must also add another thing which happened around 10-15 days back, wherein there was a news that the government is trying to introduce some regulation with regard to the web-based news sites, web portals, news portals like the Wire or such kind of news portals are there, and then also on the OTT platform. So these are very, very recent things. And as I look at, since I have been a journalist, as I look at the kind of measures or the kind of comments which are coming from the Supreme Court of India and the intentions of the government, which is always seen willing to have some kind of regulations to check the kind of fake news which is spreading, though in my viewpoint, the government agencies are the biggest source of fake news. Now, if the government is doing this all to keep a check on all disinformation or misinformation or whatever, what will happen to the fake news, I mean, starting from the government sources, and a number of such incidents have happened. Now, coming to the innovative instruments. Now, innovative instrument could be.
Please, please.
Yeah. Give me one or two
1 minute, 1 minute, within 1 minute.
So talking about the innovative instrument, so all such instruments are obviously internet based. And in this context, if we talk about the journalistic codes which are prescribed by the Press Council of India or by NBA, they to some extent can also be considered as part of this innovative mechanism. Now, moving forward, I mean, there are basically three things which I would like to make a mention. This is about the trust, engagement, and the control for accountability of media. Trust is the trust that the media organization have in the eyes of the people. This again is a very complex thing, and a lot of debate is happening, and all that has started. I'm not going too much in the history, but the debate has started since the time this Sushant Singh Rajput case happened, and the kind of coverage, the kind of reporting, kind of journalism that was introduced by Arnab Goswami, and since that time, we all know what all has happened, and we all understand that I have been a journalist and I have very little trust and faith in the kind of journalism which is happening. And I question myself, if this is the kind of journalism, if this is the journalism which is being practiced today, so what I was doing when I was in journalism, whatever is happening is completely a different kind of journalism. So there is a question mark on the voice of the citizens, which we call the trust. And then another thing which is important here is about the engagement, how much engagement of the people is happening in today's time. And then also the kind of power which is enjoyed by the people, or the control mechanism, we can say, the control which is exercised by the media on behalf of the people. And the latest examples I must give you here, one is the COVID-19. If there is a problem, there's a pandemic which is happening, then what is the role of the government and what is the role of the media? That have to put together to understand the present situation. And the way the media is trying to spreading awareness on this issue. If I can give you a very updated example, the All India Radio, in its news bulletins, it has started every bulletin. They are firstly giving a message, which is completely a new thing which is happening. Though All India Radio is such an old organization, so they are giving a message in the proper structured news bulletin about the about this COVID-19. Now, so what is the role of the media in such a case? We have to look into, and then the relationship of this user-generated content, because if we talk about the mainstream media and we do not refer to the social media, and in fact, the user-generated content has come to the mainstream media to the extent that we find that whatever is appearing on the Twitter, that makes the headline stories in television channels and the newspapers. So what is required is, as far as the empowerment is concerned, we have to empower the people. Empowerment can be by
Professor
the
Saxena,
user-generated contents. So this relationship has to be understood between the mainstream media and the social media. Though again, the fake news thing comes that whenever the mainstream media is using the content of the social media, it has to look into the veracity of the content. And then obviously the citizen journalism, though the citizen journalism in there also, the people who are generating into generation of the content, they are also using the same kind of tools which mainstream journalism do. So these are the issues which we have to look into in this conference, I believe, and which can be referred, which should be referred again and again, whatever level of discussions we are having in this national media conclave. Thank you, Mr.
thank you, Professor Saxena.